I think we are live. Hi everyone. Welcome to yet another Voron Live. And actually, we don't have much latency or lag this time, so I think this may actually be as close to live as YouTube will let us get. Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. It's time for our usual semi-annual, I don't know what you want to call this, but hi. For those of you, this is your first Voron Live you're watching. I'm Doc. So that's me. If you look to the guy who's right over there in the red shirt next to me, that's Eddie. Below me in screen is RCF, Russian cat food, and then the
Hello,
bottom
everybody.
guy in the bottom right hand corner is Steve. So that's the panel for today. Although apparently we just scared Steve off. So yeah, with that, RCF, I think you wanted to have some time to announce some stuff.
Me?
Yes.
Oh,
Cereals.
oh, thank you. I was like, I'm not releasing anything today. That's all Steve's show. One correction. Eddie's in burgundy shirt. Uh, Steve is in the red shirt.
Red-ish.
Reddish, a shade of red, if you will.
The hell?
It's in that spectrum. Anyway, I'm. It wasn't that long ago we were talking about 2,000 cereals.
Yep.
The
Um,
last stream, I think. Yeah.
yeah, which wasn't that long ago. It was V0.1 release. Well, I'm excited to announce that we now have 3,000 cereals. So apparently, cereal thing is getting exponential.
Yeah. So if you want to hit the button and make it official,
Let's do it.
We'll find out who it is.
All right, all right, all right. Hold on. Where am I queued up here? Paige, if you're
Steve's
watching.
back.
Steve is back. Paige, if you're watching, ping me a link.
Okay,
Please.
sorry about that.
Hey, man, welcome back.
Can anybody hear me?
we
Yes, we
can.
can.
Locked up.
Okay, I have the link.
Uh-oh. Now he's gone. I'm excited to see who is the 3000 cereal.
Let me log in right quick.
This printer behind me was the 1000 cereal, so
Ooh.
2000 cereals since then. And that was like trying to think. It wasn't that long ago. A year ago, I think. So.
That's old news now.
Yep.
All right.
And here I am with serial number 70.
Yep.
All right. Let's see, are these sorted correctly? Yes. Okay. Let me check the post. Do the diligence. Do the due diligence. Let's see.
I wonder which type of printer it will be.
It's well,
V2?
of
V1?
course.
V0?
It's a V2.
Of course it's a V2. Yep.
Of course it's a V2. Trying to figure out what's happening with that cable management.
Uh-oh.
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 Is that good enough?
Well, there's always the next guy in line if he
I'm
gets
not quite sure.
Oh dear.
It's pretty mess. It's a pretty big mess. All right, I'm moving on to.
So while he moves on to the next one, this is just a reminder that your cables do need to be managed to get your serial request approved. That's part of the process, and that's actually why I don't have a single-digit serial for a V2, is because I never bothered managing my cables until V2.1 came out,
Yep.
and that by that time I got 75 and 76.
And probably by that time you had to do a redo tape chain and redo Ethernet wires and silicon wires and yep.
Okay. It looks like the 3000th serial is going to go to Reddit user FXL1317.
Awesome.
And the Discord name is not provided.
Well, they will.
Oh, FranCav 1317. Oh, FranCav 1317.
What type of printer?
It's
Is it also a V2? Also a V2. Okay.
It's a V2
Nice.
with a humongous screen. So I'm a issue serial.
Nice.
Issue serial. Oh, I can't issue serial because why can I not issue serial on that one? The button's grayed out. I'm gonna let you. Yeah, it's good stuff.
Peach can work on it in the background.
Yeah. I'm gonna let them sort that out.
Perfect. And I'm sure we'll post a link to that serial in the live chat so people can look at it.
Sorry for the technical difficulties.
Awesome. Yep. So it would not be a Voron Live without something breaking. So.
I know. So one note about wire management: we're not just being dicks about it. It's a legitimate fire hazard. Like wires being not managed properly and not tied down properly to the proper places, with the vibrations that these printers experience, with accelerations that these printers experience, the wire fatigue is very real. And at times you are pushing serious amps through them, and amps plus broken wires equals heat spots, which create
fire
origins.
Yep, it's not good.
Or the thermistor breaks, the thermistor cable breaks, and then you just have.
And then you just have to do it again. Yeah, exactly. So that's the worst time. Yeah, and that's why we recommend that you always replace instead of running the probe wire that is included with the probe through your chains, always terminate them at the tool head and then use the proper PTFE or silicon wire to go through any chain that is bending repeatedly, because otherwise, at best, your thermistor or something like that will fail. At worst, I've seen one that ended up serious current went through something that was not supposed to have current, and it ended up melting all the wires together and creating smoke that filled the printer and set off the fire alarm. So we don't want that to happen to anyone else, and so just be sure to do things safely. Make sure all your AC wires are tidied up correctly and things like that. So we haven't had a Voron casualty yet, and we really do not want to.
No.
If you have questions about something, feel free to ask in one of the help channels, and we'll be sure to provide you with the good information. So,
well said. We blow things up so you don't have to.
Yep.
So you guys can hear me now.
Yes, we can. You're back, and you're good. So
good. Sorry about that. I have no idea what happened.
Well, it's fixed now, and perfect timing. So, yeah. Let me jump through. Should I do my spiel next?
Yep, because
okay, awesome.
This started life as your baby, I believe.
Yeah, sure. Before I jump over to Steve, because really he is the star of the show today, because he's done all of the hard work, and I've been able to sit back and relax and watch the work being done. I just wanted to quickly go back over the trajectory for V1 from kind of 2018 through to where we are now. So back in 2017, I bought an ANET A8, and that was my first 3D printer. And of course, I quickly found out that was not the printer that I wanted to keep long term. Around that time, RCF posted his V2.0 teaser video, and I think anyone around that time who saw that was quite captivated by the quad gantry leveling. And one thing in particular that stuck out was the use of MGN linear rails instead of linear rods, because if you back a MGN rail with a aluminum extrusion, your stiffness of that versus an 8mm rod is about 10 times higher. So If you're looking at larger build volumes or faster accelerations like we have with Input Shaper, that's a really critical component to improving your printer's performance. So at that time, I knew that whatever I bought next had to have linear rails for X and Y. Fast forward until the fall of that year in 2018, V2.1 came out, and I built one of those. And in December, RCF released the V1.6, which was one of the last linear rod-based V1 printers. And at that time, it was still harder to source those MGN rails, so it made a lot of sense to keep the V1 platform on linear rods. Sorry, I misspoke. But I knew that if you move the V2 gantry and essentially put it on a V1, you could get an additional performance gain with higher accelerations and greater rigidity. And as we saw around that same time, adding the direct drive toolhead requires some more stiffness. So fast forward again to April of last year, we released the V1.8, which was essentially exactly what I described. That MGN rail based XY, but the Z-axis was essentially identical to the V1.6. My intention at that time was to launch V1.8 and then quickly turn around and do a follow-up launch. But having gone through my first Voron release, it is an immense amount of work. There's a lot of exciting developments and really cool breakthroughs, but then especially close to the end, there's just so many little mundane details that just wear you out. There's so many things to keep track of. So for most of 2020, I basically was just like, nope, no more Voron releases for me. So
and it's not like 2020 wasn't like this easy year or anything, anyways, right?
Exactly right. Yep, COVID and everything like that, and the community blowing up, and so so Steve had joined the team during that time period, and I believe Steve has at least one of every Voron printer now. I think he may have 2 or 3 of someone. They just keep multiplying. It seems like he has one version of every extruder, every printer. He just has everything. And that's one of the cool things about Steve, is that he is behind the scenes. You don't really see him that often. He doesn't say, "Oh, I created this amazing thing," but he has contributed so much over the last year or two to making sure our releases are high quality, tested, that they're easy to assemble and make sense. So even though, and all the CAD models and incremental V2.4 updates, he's put in so much work to all of those releases. So when he, in December, was like, I still haven't built a V1, I'd like to build one and work on the next kind of iteration of that, I was super excited because I know his work is so excellent. So it's been really fun to watch him over the last about 8 months since he started working on it. And just, again, be able to do all the test prints and assemble and test things and provide some feedback, but not have to do all the grunt work. So his standard of kind of what he thinks is good is so high that oftentimes he was the last person to say, no, I'm going to keep iterating on this until it's perfect. So I'm really excited for him to be able to share all the work he's been doing and all the time he has put into this. So that's enough for me, and I'll turn it over to Steve.
Okay. Well, Eddie, thank you. I really appreciate the kind words. I started my Voron journey almost 2 years ago, wanting to build a Voron 2.2. It had just been released. Other things happened. I didn't get into it until right at the Voron 2.4 release. So I scrapped all the stuff I'd printed for 2.2 and built 2.4. And I saw a lot of opportunity to take the little bit of CAD skills and my own spin on things to start contributing. At some point, I was invited into the crew, and one of my first projects working with RCF was on switchwire, and I dove into that and had a few suggestions for a few parts, and did a lot of the kind of grindy work on the CAD, and that's kind of continued. COVID has really given me an opportunity to dive into this, and I like to tinker, I like to build, So I think I'm about to build Voron number 9. I have 2 V2s, a switch wire, a legacy, 3 V0s. So it's been fun. A lot of support from the team, a lot of support from Eddie. But like Eddie was saying, at some point, I think around December timeframe, I realized, you know what, I want a V1. That'll complete the Voron Master Collection. And
I was going to say the trifecta, but it's no longer that.
So I got an opportunity. LDO had an extra purple V1 frame from the group buy pricing, so I purchased that from them and told Eddie, hey, are you going to start on V1.9? I want to help. And I had a list of things in my mind that I really wanted out of a printer to make it what I'd like to build and use. So Eddie and I talked back and forth a bit, and around December, I started playing around. I had some ideas for the Z Gantry. I had some goals. So I had some goals going into this that I wanted a few pretty basic things. I wanted to control the Z cabling with a chain. I didn't want to go with the droopy wire. Obviously, the 3-stepper bed leveling setup. And I really wanted more room above the afterburner. That I thought that it was a little cramped for the PTFE tube up there. Along with that, there are some Voron design goals that are kind of in our nature. One of those being an easy upgrade path. So starting with V1.8 frame and parts, and trying to stay within the constraints of an easy upgrade path, easy parts availability and sourcing. And another Voron goal would be to stay as close to cost neutral for a V1.8 build as possible. So with that, let me pan my camera and let me introduce you to Voron Trident. So we have had a long-standing issue in Voron with our naming. You're new to the project and you come in and you see V1 and V2 and you automatically assume that's version 1, version 2. Version 2 must be better. So when in reality, those are Voron 1 and Voron 2, and then there are revisions of those over time. So to eliminate that confusion, we've talked for a long time about giving them proper names, and we are now at Voron Trident. So instead of trying to pan my camera around and give you a bunch of angles of the live printer here, I prepared a little slide of screenshots, and we'll talk about the different features and what we've done with this. So let me share my screen and let Doc switch over, and hopefully we can see it.
Click to watch stream.
Oh, let's see. Is there?
And I'm gonna wait just a second to make sure we're good and live.
I'm not seeing the watch stream on my end of things. Oh, there we go. There we go. Ha!
So are we live on the shared screen?
So I just see a blank page right now.
Yep,
Okay,
I think that's
fine.
the first slide. Yep,
So,
perfect. There we go.
So this is
It's so pretty.
view. We're on Trident. So we're going to go through this from kind of a top down, talk about a few different aspects of the project and what we've done and major changes. So we're going to start with the frame. There are changes from 1.8. There's no way around it. One of the goals for a Voron base goal is that the 3Z setup be symmetric. We're not allowed to put 2 steppers on one side of the printer and one on the other. So, however, this is a pretty easy upgrade path from 1.8. There are a total of 14 new wrench access holes to allow for the bottom extrusions to be moved flush with the bottom of the Z extrusions, and then to move the Y gantry extrusions down by 20 millimeters. So I talked about before wanting more room in the, and sorry about that, I am new to this, and my GoPro has some timeout that I haven't figured out how to turn off, so give me a moment and I'll turn it back on while it's
No problem. We can still hear you.
Yep. Yep,
Yep.
but you're probably also hearing the beeps from it, so sorry.
I
The
think it's
beeps are
gone.
gone now.
Yeah, they're gone. So
It died.
So, back to this. So 14 total new wrench access holes, 2 cut extrusions, and 2 of those extrusions get one end of them tapped. You'll end up with several extra extrusions out of a V1.8 because, rest in peace, we decided to remove the backpack. So something else I want to point out on this slide is I spent a lot of time on the CAD for this, kind of obsessed over it. Knowing some of the problems with roll-in T-nuts that are being worked on and being explored, I made sure that the CAD had those modeled into the frame. So it's easy for folks to open that up and see where, if they needed to pre-install T-nuts, they could go there. There are at least a couple more upgrade options for V1.8 builders. If you really didn't care about the extra room over the afterburner and you didn't mind losing some Z travel, then you could cut the bottom of the 30 millimeters off the bottom of the Z extrusions, and it would work. You could use your existing panels just with reduced room in different areas. So moving on, the next big change in Voron Trident is the gantry. So moving to the 3Z stepper setup meant that we didn't have linear rods in the way of the Y rails, which meant that we can basically take the Voron 2 gantry and pull it straight into the assembly. So that's what we've done. The A and B stepper mounts are largely unchanged with a couple of notable exceptions. There, in the last Voron 2 release, there were some tweaks to the plastic parts to help prevent folks from misrouting the belts. That's been included here. And one aspect that I discovered as I was working on and looking at 1.8 is the gantry wiring was captured and would make service later more difficult. So I added a wire slot with a little bolt-on cover to allow that to hopefully work a little better. The front idlers are the only part, I believe, on the entire printer that did not get a change. So, and then we get to go with the regular cable chain setup. They're not mounted from above. They're mounted just like a V2. I mean, the XYX setup is exactly compatible with Voron 2. We also have taken the excellently developed MGN12 mod from the community. So big thanks to Hart K, Arc, and Josh Murrah for their work on this. I went through this. I corrected a couple of very minor things, the Hall effect magnet being out of position, and then just like fillet and chamfer type stuff. Otherwise, it was pretty much ready to go. There is a little thing with the MGN12 mod in that it required a new fastener and button head screws to hold the carriage to the rail, and we did a minor change to the afterburner motor plate so we can keep the fastener count as low as possible. So once again, thanks to the guys in the user mods community. This saved a lot of work having to redesign it. And I mean, for the space constraints, there's only so many ways to skin this cat. Let me look here. Okay, so something I forgot to mention is going to the V2 gantry allows us to use the V2 end stop pod. But we get a lot of flexibility here because we've also built in the ability to put a micro switch on the A stepper mount and for Y and on the carriage for X. So lots of options there. And that's kind of a big theme of the whole build is there's lots of options on the way you can move forward with it and what parts you can mix and match. So the big one, the 3Z stepper setup. Here it is. We've gone from linear rods to linear rails in each corner. We add the vertical rear extrusion that is blind jointed on the bottom, and there is a printed part at the top to attach it to the gantry extrusion with some adjustment there to make sure that you can line it up completely. One of my goals before, a cable chain for Z. That is included, as well as moving the Z end stop to the back where it was on the side for V1.8. The rear mount is here with some wire management options, and we are using the GE5C spherical bearings as the pivot point on these.
Those spherical bearings is really the magic
here,
sauce.
We had so we did a beta test on Trident. We had a group of folks who came in and gave us a lot of help, a lot of suggestions, and did a lot of building. That would be Blam, Senku, Telx, and Telxoid. And one of those guys actually broke this piece in the back and couldn't figure out how. So I did a slight tweak on it, but I also did a stress test on it, hung it off of the edge of a table and just started stacking weights on it. And it ultimately ended up holding 80 pounds. So even the version that he broke held 60 pounds. So we're confident that this will be a strong joint, but just kind of an example where in the beta test we had something come up and we wanted to test it. Here you'll see also see the Z end stop. It's transplanted directly from V2.4. The front joints use the same GE5C spherical bearing. There is a Gucci IGUS alternative that is a direct bolt-in. All that's in the sourcing guide. The assembly ends up being sturdy enough, stiff enough that we're seeing that it seems to be more tolerant to slightly bent lead screws. Both Eddie and I do see a visible wobble in the lead screws, but we do not see that in the resulting prints. So back to here, the other change from 1.8 is we're getting a full 250 millimeters of Z travel. So that and it's just moving the bottom extrusions down by 30 millimeters and moving the Y extrusions down by 20 millimeters, and then just the particular configuration still gives us that extra 20 millimeters over V1.8.
Yeah, the 250Z is the first in the V1 history, or V1 style of the printer history. That's kind of been the magic goal from the beginning, and it couldn't get there with the LMU style bearings. So
yeah. So yeah, we're
congrats, guys.
One major change that is required from a 1.8 is you have to turn your bed 180 degrees. Means if you have the silicone pad already attached, it's going to come out the front. One of my goals or plans in the project was to create a nice little cover for that. I didn't get to it. I'm sure the mod community is going to have a lot of fun with that. So we did make a decision based on the overall goals of the project of having an easy upgrade path from 1.8, ease of assembly, and availability of off-the-shelf parts, and the fact that the feature is not used in any practical sense right now, in terms of slicer compatibility or whatever, to not go with what you see typically as kinematic mounts on the different printers. So moving on, go down to the skirt. So we lost the backpack, we gained the skirt. So this is dimensionally compatible with the Voron 2, again with the theme of trying for as much cross-pollination between the printers as possible. The front display is based on it, but new. Corners, skirts. The direct carryover from V2 is the side fan mounts. And so we've spec'd, thanks to Jared's input, we've spec'd a new mounting foot, these are better than the compressor feed in that they don't squish. You don't get your printer leaning to the back. So these are commonly referred to as guitar amplifier feet. I think they are very easy to mount and very inexpensive. I think you get 8 of them for like $4 on Amazon, and even cheaper on AliExpress. However, they are fully compatible. You can bolt the compressor feet directly in the same spot, and they work just fine.
Those things are amazing. I have those on the V2. Plus, compressor feet are kind of hard to come by now because there's so many Vorons and it's in the spec.
So the front display, I wanted a little more accent color. I came up with a no glue method for providing that, and then RCF got his hands in the mix. Got his and he corrected one of the remaining V2 gripes I had, was the way that the display mounts and needing to not having direct access to the heat set inserts that were required in mounting that. And RCF came up with a clever new mounting solution that allows the display to be angled in a much easier mounting method. So it uses a filament similar to the Afterburner, uses a strand of filament as a hinge, just because of space constraints. We only have 5 millimeters there. And then a M3x40 screw in the back that is indexed with detents in the hinge mount. And this works really well. It's super easy to assemble. So thank you, RCF. Appreciate that. Moving around to the back of the printer, moved the stepper motor in the center rear, so I couldn't just be lazy and copy the V2 skirt, so moved the power off to the side, which I think a lot of people like better anyway. Support for the filtered inlet and the C14 style as well. Then we're getting close to the end here, kind of getting into the electronics. So DIN rail mounts, similar to V2. The mounts to the extrusions are as universal as the profiles that I have on hand would let them. Everything, all the weird profiles, I have 3 different ones, work fine. Overall layout, this is a 250 on the screen. That's a spider board kind of placeholder for scale. 250s are always somewhat cramped, but there's plenty of room to lay it out as you want. all new DIN clips and mounts and controller mounts. Thanks to Insurgus for coming up with a really satisfying. If my camera was working right now, I'd show you one in live. But these mounts hook on one end and then press down into place and snap into place and hold extremely securely. So sounds like RCF might have one to. My GoPro still says powering off this whole time, so I think I'm a little whatever. But you're muted.
Yeah, you got to hear that satisfying click.
And it doesn't move.
Yeah.
So, Insurgus, good job.
Yeah. To go along with those, I came up with a bunch of more plastic efficient and build plate efficient controller mounts. They're all 2-piece, super easy to print. The minor change to the exhaust housing, and this is based on a suggestion we got in a ticket, and I am sorry, but I could not find the ticket, and I don't remember who suggested it. So if it was you message me, I'll fix that. And it's really just a making sure that this works across a range of printables, because this part is probably the one that most people have the most problem with warping. And with the center, with the little filter cover there being held on with just a center screw, it wasn't sealing very well. So just a simple change to move those screws to the edge. And there's the overall design. Now what I want to cover here is, although it looks exactly like a V2, there are some changes in that the door hinges have been corrected to have enough room for VHB tape on there, as well as the door. And then I am putting in the BOM and sourcing guide the recommendation of a combination of 3mm foam tape, 3mm foam tape for the side panels, and 1mm for the other panels. And that's just to ensure that even with a not perfectly flat Lexan sheet, which many of them aren't, it's less likely to rub on your carriages, on both the Z and the Y. So let me see if I missed anything. Speaking of panels, the big change from 1.8 is that it will require almost all new panels. The panels are 30mm taller than V1.8.
And so for those of you who were asking what's behind the sheet behind Eddie, now you know.
So kind of some of the miscellaneous things. I've talked about it a lot here. We're really hoping the ability to use parts between the two printers, Trident and V2, is going to allow things like maybe easier. I mean, you're seeing more and more pre-made harnesses. Maybe those can be easier to be made universal between the printers. We are adding, because of the additional support of the 3Zs, we are adding support for a 350 build. So all of the STLs are and all the CAD is there for the parts to support 350. We do have with this, so my Trident has been 98% done as far as the CAD and design and everything since before the V0.1 release. And that's allowed us, between that time and now, to have our beta testers and other folks in the crew. We have at least 9 of these up and running right now in printing. So we've had a really decent test period, and very few changes, but a lot of tweaks, a lot of little things between then and now. And so I started this project, really started designing in January and releasing here in August, has given us time to have probably a close to the most prepared release we've had. So Once again, I want to thank the crew and beta testers for their support on this. Kilo Qubit has done a huge job in going through everything. Telxoid did a great job on trying to get some or getting as close as we can with some configurations. Another thing, something I forgot when talking about the electronics is it is a 6-stepper setup, so you will need a controller board that supports at least 6 steppers. Right now in our environment of chip shortages, it's hard to pinpoint and say you should use this one because we have a configuration for this one and all that kind of thing. So that's going to be the one area that's going to be a little lagging, is solid configurations for the whole range of 6-stepper boards. There are a lot of them out there, all the way up to like the Duet 3 Mini 5 with the expansion board. And you can also do similar to any other Voron with Clipper, is a combination of boards to reach your stepper count. So I think that's it. And like I said, thanks to the crew and the beta testers and everyone that contributed. I'm gonna reboot my GoPro to see if it'll come back on.
Sounds good. Let's see. I know we have a few questions here. Let's see.
I missed something.
Okay.
Charlie approves.
I love that purple extrusion. It looks so good. Let's see here for questions. Let's see. One question was provisions against Z-wobble. Steve, do you want me to cover that while you're rebooting your computer?
Yes, please.
Okay. So the one thing with Z-wobble, you're really looking at the stiffness of your assembly of your frame of the bed supports versus the stiffness of your lead screws. So if you think of V1.8, it uses those 8mm rods, and then the stepper is also approximately 8mm, in diameter. So both of those have about equal stiffness. With this new setup, though, our MGN9 rail back with the 2020 extrusion, again, as I mentioned earlier, is about an order of magnitude greater stiffness than the lead screw. And the other thing is the mounts for those lead screw nuts have some play in them. So typically what I've been doing with my printers and for this release is to use M3 screws with lock nuts. And that allows you to not fully tighten the lead screw nuts to the mounts. So those lead screw nuts can float back and forth. And that really allows, even I have a set of bent lead screws. Steve has a full set of bent lead screws. And actually the other printer behind me have really bent lead screws. And in all cases, we tried doing test prints, and essentially, we didn't see the dreaded Z-wobble effect that we have, with V1.8. So that helps a lot, because sometimes it sucks if you get parts from China and they're bent and you can't do anything about it. That really sucks. So.
Another question, Steve, that was asked is, what sizes are spec now? I know your rig is a 250, and so what's the design envelope for this?
My rig is a 300.
Oh.
I do have the parts and for a 250 build, and my plan is to do that on a stream, maybe just in Discord, but I haven't decided how to do that. But my plan is to build that for people. But we do support the same range as the V2, 250, 300, and 350.
And I'm sure someone will come along and try and be clever and fit a 200 or get really crazy and make a micro Trident. So I guess that would be like a dessert fork.
Now, one note, similar to V1.8, we are speccing a 250 Z travel across the board, mostly for parts availability. But there's nothing stopping someone from building a taller v1.8. It does end up getting to be a little bit of a tall printer. I would say tall boy, but I think Uber has that on copyright or trademark.
Yeah, the other thing, Steve, I'm not sure, I forget if you had mentioned, this is supported up to 350 by 350 for X and Y now. The
Yes.
bed assembly is extremely rigid, and so I haven't had any issues. I do have a 350 by 350, and also a like 410 by, yeah, we're not going to talk about that, but a really big big printer. And I think that build plate is 11 pounds, and the stock plastic Z assembly is perfectly fine with it. So
Let's see. I'm sure the question has been asked, when will this be available? Steve, aren't the STLs going live this week?
So with the caveat that we have to work through every little process that gets things released, everything is ready right now. The CAD is completely done. Like I said, I have obsessed over the CAD for months. So I hope that the work put into that is appreciated and that everything is modeled in there, all the nuts, all the foam strips that I recommend. So, but let us know if there's anything I missed, because I guarantee there is something. So yeah, the CAD, all the STLs, the manual is completely done, as well as a little supplement manual that shows in more detail your changes to that you would need to do to a 1.8 frame.
Yeah, the plan is to basically hit go and do all the stuff that needs to get done today. So all of this should be available today, depending on what time zone you live in.
Yeah.
Mere
yeah,
hours from now.
Yep, I see some questions here. Do we still need the 5-volt power supply with the new main boards? If your control board has built-in 5-volt that's enough for your Raspberry Pi, for instance, I believe that Octopus and Spider both do. You will not need that 5-volt supply. But since there's control board supply is so finicky, we wanted to support any potential combination. So there's still space for that 5-volt power supply. Let's see here. Another one, is the filter box compatible with the V2.4? Yes, it is. So that would be a drop-in if you want to change. If you have trouble printing that back piece, you can use the updated version. Same thing with the X-axis. Essentially is cross-compatible. So if you want to change over to the MGN12, you can do that. Just printing the V1.9 parts.
The cat is here. I want some of your vodka.
Yes. Yeah, the vodka.
I see another question here. Are all the rails going to be MGN12 or is just the gantry? And it is just the X-axis that is MGN12. The Z and the Y axes are still MGN9. And we do that because the MGN12 on those other extrusions would extend beyond the kind of outside of the aluminum frame. And so you wouldn't be able to enclose the printer if you use MGN12 on those parts.
So, question, are future releases going to have names like Trident instead of numbers? And the answer there is maybe. I mean, V2 is kind of, I'm going to say almost iconic now, but we do kind of like our code names and the like, so your guess is as good as mine, honestly. We will make that decision when the time comes, and I think that's how we handle a lot of our really clever naming and whatnot.
Let's see here. Yeah, someone commented about the accent logos in the skirts, and Steve came up with that, and I really like how that kind of makes the logo pop. It's really cool.
Yeah, some of the evolution of how I came, I didn't really cover, and I wanted to. How I came to kind of take the design lead on this, because I came into this just wanting to help Eddie with whatever he was going to do with V1.9, and had a couple ideas, some ideas that didn't fly, like a floating rear lead screw for the bed, trying to keep the backpack in place, and the evolution of what was required, it really started with the skirts. The evolution of what was required in the skirts for me to get some printer that could start printing for testing required that I start designing the skirts, and I got a skirt design going, and it just kind of kept going. And Eddie was supportive and gracious enough to just say, you know what, you're doing a great job with this. Why don't you just keep moving with it? And I really appreciate that and the freedom to do that.
Yep. And I think one of the biggest kind of concerns going from V1.8 to Trident was really trying to figure out that cost delta, because eventually if a V1 platform gets too expensive, you know, it's kind of hard to justify in certain cases, even though it's its own printer and it stands on its own. But with a lot of the cost removal, especially in the frame, I believe a V1 frame has always been more expensive. At least the V1.8 was more expensive than the V2.4. There's a lot of cost reduction in that, and just some other areas of the printer that essentially it's as cost neutral as you can be. It's probably within $20 or so, depending on sourcing and stuff like that. Obviously, an upgrade from a V1.8 to V1.9 will be more expensive than that. But if you're buying all new V1.9 or Trident parts, that cost delta is very low. So it was really exciting when we realized that.
So Steve, there's a couple of questions about the whole what extrude. Oh wait, yeah, I'm unmuted. What extrusions can get reused from 1.8 to Trident? What is net new if you have a 1.8 today, and what parts can you reuse?
There is nothing net new. Every extrusion that you need exists in the V1.8 frame.
Well, so the extrusions, it's just you might have to cut one or two down to go from 1.9 or from 1.8 to Trident. Now, as far as net new parts, there are the GE5C bearings, the new rear rail, two front rails actually, and an additional lead screw. And I'm sure I'm leaving out a vast number of ancillary bits and bobs, but
so you would need an additional 300 millimeter integrated lead screw stepper, 3 MGN9 300 millimeter rails.
One.
And
because if you're upgrading, you're going to salvage 2 from the X.
You're right. You're right.
Yep.
So that comes back into the options. You could run dual MGM9s on the X on this, and it would work just fine. You can run a single MGM9. I do that on my green V2, and you see in the background. All of those options. The single MGM9, it's working great. All of those options are there. So at a minimum, you could get away with that extra lead screw, the bearings, and a few rails.
It all depends on how creative and handy you are with cutting extrusions and drilling and tapping stuff, which honestly isn't that hard if you do it a few times. But you can always throw money at a problem to make it easier if you wish. So.
Yeah. Pro tip: if you have a saw or a miter saw in your that thing chews through aluminum like no business. Nobody's business. Look at this, a manual.
If you switch, I was gonna say. Oh, so I haven't been on camera.
But I dropped it back to the grid, not to the screen share.
So this is just an example. So the a few printed drill guides, but an example of the Voron 1 to Voron Trident upgrade guide. It's just a few pages, but identifying which extrusions are going to be modified, and then a list of a series of pages detailing those modifications. So huge thanks to Dinar You know, I didn't even mention Dinar by name in the in my stream, and that's a big failure on my part. His work, the work that he goes into in creating these manuals for us, is above and beyond. It's amazing. So thank you very much, Dinar.
And having everything together on release is just, yeah. Steve and Dinar and you know the team have put together so much work and effort to get everything, you know, to where it's at, and I'm hopeful that Steve can go on a Voron vacation here and in a bit and think about something else other than, did I forget to put that T-nut in that CAD in the rear back corner or something like that. But
So I'm just gonna say right now, the things that you may find are in the sourcing guide and in the configurations. So don't hesitate to report those issues. It's just ran out of motivation and time. Those are the tough parts.
Yeah. Please remember, we're not a company. None of us are getting paid for this. This is a passion project. And sometimes life gets in the way. Like we're here to provide you with the most excellent service possible to the best of our abilities. But if we miss something, please, file tickets, ping us on Discord, yada, yada, yada.
Any other questions out there?
Let's see. I replied.
I really like what Blam had said. So, you know, generally when you're assembling a frame together, a lot of those cuts are all critical to making sure your frame is square. And all of the cuts needed to go from a V1.8 to Trident are not critical. So they're going to be, you know, if you cut them a little bit off 90 degrees or, you know, stuff like that. I did it with a hand saw essentially in a miter block. They're all not critical. So you just need to make sure that you're cutting one side of the extrusion and the uncut side that's, you know, good from assuming it goes flush against an extrusion, and that one's the critical side. Then the other one's just kind of out there. So that's really nice, you know, to make it easier for upgradability.
Yeah, the only caveat there is that they can't be too long. Too long, you're going to start bumping into the gantry extrusion or the rear Z assembly. But a couple of millimeters, even too short, is no problem.
What's the cat's name?
Charlie.
Charlie. Hi, Charlie.
Charlie is very chill.
Yes.
It's a good name for a cat.
Charlie is one of those tolerant cats. I can hang him upside down by his rear feet and he'll just beg for more.
I have one of those cats in my shop, same color. Not tolerant whatsoever.
And Steve's camera died again.
Yep.
Yeah.
He'll be back.
Yep. Yeah. One question is, you know, will these updates get ported to V2? And I think right now the answer is eventually. If you're interested in doing the upgrades, the files are there available for you. Go ahead and grab them and print them and install them. But as far as getting an actual complete V2 update release, that will be sometime in the undetermined future. So
yeah,
we're not rushing to push all those changes out just because we don't have enough bandwidth right now. So
basically, yeah. This has the X gantry from 1.9. Sorry, Trident, and it works fine. It literally is a bolt-on.
Yep. Let's see here.
I'm not even going to try to get my camera back up. It's just taking too much.
Steve has given up.
Let's see here.
Let's see. A couple of just general questions, I will. So someone asked, and I don't know who asked these because someone's copying and pasting messages from all the various channels to one central stream, so I can actually be keeping track of it. So will there ever be any non-printer Vorons? And they said in parenthesis popcorn machine.
Yes.
Maybe. Yes, maybe.
We've joked about a coffee roaster, but
Oh, A shower,
A
perhaps.
shower. Yep.
Yes, oh yes, the infamous Voron shower. One day, not this show, but one day that may actually see the light of day.
Exactly.
I have
Uh,
to fix the side panels because despite what we learned on all of these printers, I mounted them rigidly, and through thermal expansion and contraction in the sunlight, because it's an outdoor shower, the panels are basically like this now
yep.
because I ignored the wisdom of years of experience of mounting panels to a thing that cycles hate. Because, why not?
Mistakes were made, lessons were learned.
Yeah, it's basically a Voron-ish frame outdoor shower with printed mounts for hardware and things to shower the sand off because I live a mile from the beach. Trying to save my plumbing.
So, two kind of like tied questions. Any chance for a belted Z on the V0? And speaking of a V0, what are the thoughts on the Micron? I will say that Nimgrea is not here, so we can't speak for what's in his head.
Yep.
But we never say no to what's potentially a good idea. It's just the V0 is really small, and so getting it all to fit and fit well and up to our standards, you know, for now, we don't know, but we're not saying no on that. The Micron, I'll offer my take on it first, and you guys can weigh in. But the Micron's just clever as hell. I mean, you took something designed for 2020 extrusions and a 200 by 200 or 250 by 250 minimum size, and they managed to shrink it down using 15 by 15s and MGN7s and all this other stuff to make a micro V2, and that's really really clever to me. Uh, do I want the stress of trying to do yet more with drop-in nuts on a 15 by 15? Personally, no, but that's just because of the annoyance factor. I think the design work, though, as I said, is just cool as hell.
Yeah.
Yep. I saw a question about the dual MGN9 to MGN12 for X, and getting the alignment on those two rails, depending on your strategy of how you mounted everything and how good your rails or your MGN9 rails were, it could be a bit tricky. And I think the concept with the MGN12 was it's easier to find a higher quality MGN12 without any slop in it. Um, there were some interesting kind of implications with that because the MGN12X carriage is actually slightly wider than an MGN9H carriage. And with the V1.8, there is not enough extra travel on X in order to have the full 250, for instance, bed access plus reach the Z pin to the right side of the bed. But since Trident went to the rear pin behind the bed, we essentially have the same X travel as the V2. And so that gives us the extra ability to not worry about the 5 millimeters lost in X. So that was one cool little side effect of switching to Trident, that it would be a lot more difficult to do that with a V1.8.
So I had a whole outline and everything, and I still missed a bunch of things, and you just reminded me of something else I wanted to mention. The MGN12 setup does put a little bit of restriction on which probe you're going to use, because keeping the nozzle in the same spot and space constraints, it is very iffy to doesn't fit if you try to use a PL08 probe. And that depends on which hot end. For instance, the Mosquito hot end sits down just slightly lower than the Dragon. And if you use a Mosquito hot end, then you've got about a millimeter of space for the PL08, and it will work. But in general, we're going to recommend for the MGN12 setup away from the PL08. And that'll be mentioned in the sourcing guide as kind of a reminder as people are speccing these out. But that's just a universal across the board. The MGN12 setup has some space constraints there that make just the PL08, the Omron, the Panasonics, the Super Pindo with the pinion adapter should all work.
Yeah, this is kind of beginning of the end of the PLNO probes and their clones. because once V2 adopts the same basically rail configuration, those probs are going to go away too, in favor of the aforementioned Omrons,
Voron,
and we don't have a Voron prob yet.
maybe.
It might be in development. I haven't been to electronics channels in a while.
Uh, and
One
also,
question. Go
sorry,
for it.
I was just going to add in, there are two Panasonic probes if you want to drop the money on legit ones that also fit in. One of the Panasonics is end of life as of next month, but the other one is still in production. And I mean, they're not horrible. I want to say they're like $35 a pop on Arrow, DigiKey, Mouser, etc. And I've been running those for a while, and I'm a big fan of them. So just one more option out there.
Yeah. I saw a question about belted Z for V1/Trident, and I think I don't doubt that it could work, and I know some people have done it already. I think the one thing about the Trident and V1 kind of platform is that the Z assembly is really meant to be as kind of set it and forget it as possible. So you don't have to, you're not worrying about adjusting Z belt tension or anything like that. You're just setting a lead screw in and mounting everything together. There's something kind of nice about that as far as the assembly process, and especially for newer users who might not, understand the intricacies of tensioning everything perfectly. So, belted Z is always an option in the future. It's definitely a great Voron users mod if someone wants to release an official version for this. But at this time, there's something special about having that very basic low part count Z assembly.
And this Trident Z assembly is so easy to work on. You remove 3 bolts and the whole bed comes out. Remove 3 bolts and disconnect your wiring. The whole bed comes out. I've swapped the parts in that for minor revisions dozens of times, and it's never the hardest part of that whole swap is taking the side panels off so I can get to stuff easier.
Yep.
It is really easy to work on.
So I'm going to kind of touch broadly on a series of questions that a bunch of people have asked. And the question boiled down to generally is, when will we ever see a Voron insert something here? Or the other side of that question is, will there ever be a Voron insert something here? And the answer to that is a definitive maybe. Because I can't speak to what may, catch RCF or Eddie or Steve or any of the other design teams fancy later today or tomorrow or anything else. So we don't want to say no to any good idea. It's just, can we take that good idea and get it to what we would call being worthy of the Voron name? If the boss will let me speak and put words in his mouth.
Can I say one definitive no ever?
Yes.
The Delta printer, because A, it's not 2010, and B, that word has very negative connotations right now.
Fair enough. I see what you did there. But there might be a Voron console one day.
Oh.
Just dodging the word Delta, but
What
probably
year
not.
is this?
Yeah, I know. Just being a smartass. But so once again, it's a matter of, can we take an idea and can we get it to what we would call our standard would be? So as I said, the answer there is maybe. Much
Basically.
like the thing you see behind Eddie's shoulders over there.
Yeah,
No comment.
that's madness right there. Well, look at it. It moves by itself. Oh.
Yep.
That's Eddie flexing.
Yeah, but notice the wires aren't managed.
Yep.
Nope.
No serial for this.
It's a prototype.
It is very much a prototype. And yes, lead screws that are that long definitely are not straight. So good thing that the Trident Z can handle it. Let's see, any other questions? I'm trying to jump through the.
Did you want to touch on what level of PIF plan you might have, Doc?
So in terms of when will this be available in PIF,
We lost.
can you hear me?
Yep.
All right, cool. So with PIF, the STLs going live is when it will be available as a part of PIF. If you have a v1.8 request, it will be moved to a Trident. I'll need to look and see what the queue is looking like right now. But once again, given the serious intercompatibility of 1.8 to Trident, it's not a big deal in my mind, that move. In terms of cost, I'll be very frank, I have not played it out. I don't expect it to cost more than 1.8 for PIF, and odds are, when I actually get around to playing it out, it will come up less. It's just I need to sit down and play with it all. So expect that in the next few days in terms of what the price will be. Let's see. I'm gonna just.
There was a question about how many hours the Trident printers have had, and it's a lot. I think someone has one doing PIF, and then since Steve's had the design largely complete for quite some time, other than minor tweaks, a lot of us have been printing pretty consistently on them. So um, that is great. We've definitely ironed out any little things here and there. Let's see.
I wanted to build one, and I have all the parts printed in the box over there, and I have all the hardware. But because of choices I made for my V1, the upgrade path for me is not easy because I can't get it out of the electronics lives outside of these little things where my printers are parked, where some of the printers are parked, the ones that are not closed. And in my infinite wisdom, I forgot to actually put a disconnect on the harness, which requires me to disconnect the entire harness to remove the printer from the case. So that was going to happen, and then it didn't because I remembered my bad decisions.
I sense a lot of crimping in your future.
Do you need to borrow my Molex tool?
It's, you know what? I deserve the punishment. I'm gonna order the shittiest crimper on Amazon and just cry for hours.
Someone asked how fast does Trident print. I did have 48-volt drivers on my V1, and I think I hit close to 1,000 millimeters a second on 0.9 degree steppers. So it'll go as fast as your heart desires. But yeah, the rigid gantry definitely helps.
Yeah.
There's no limitation really other than how big your hot end is and how much voltage you're putting into your stepper drivers.
And he lives his life a quarter mile at a time.
I actually sold all my 48-volt stuff because it wasn't the 5160s with sensorless homing. Really did not like that at 48 volts. So let's see. Yeah, the X end stop on the toolhead has a very similar wire routing to the V1.8, where it kind of goes through the toolhead and up out the probe connection area. So if you do that, it'll be very familiar from V1.8, if you wish to do that. I think Steve and I both looked at the wiring harnesses, and since, assuming you use the X and Y end stops on the XY joint, everything should be exactly identical. The Z wire section will be different, but it's essentially the same thing. I think V2's Z section of harness from the A stepper down to the controls will be a little bit longer, so you'll just have to loop some extra wiring in the bottom of the compartment. But yep, and that's huge because I absolutely hate wiring, and having having a pre-made harness will be a big deal for my next printer. So. Let's see.
Mm.
Any other questions?
Let's see. any chance of a large format Voron in the future? Once again, this goes back to maybe. The one thing remember about large format machines is, can you fit it through your door? Because I mean, a 300 by 300 is pushing it on a residential doorway. A 350 by 350 depends. Any larger than that, at least for U.S. code, you can't fit something larger than a 350 by 350 through a residential door. So, yeah, in terms of upgrade path from a V2, I've seen this question asked a few times. This is intended as the spiritual successor to the V1 line of printers. This will need to go through a, you know, I'm sorry, my brain and my words quit getting along. In terms of going from a V2 to this is going to be very different than going from a V1 to this. So I would.
I have not. I just realized that I assembled this frame up here, so I have no idea if I'm gonna actually be able to take it all the way down the stairs and around the corner. So if I move, I might just have to completely rip apart my printer. But yep, there was a question about the V1s I have. The red and black one here is the same one from V1.8 photos. That's a 250 by 250. The one in the corner is a 350 by 350 by 250. And yes, it is doomed. It has the 40/40 corners and insulation. And then, of course, this one behind me is not officially a Trident, but it's close. And that one's just enormous, as you can see. So it's going to take me a little bit to, keep using the word Trident instead. Let's see.
Standard door is 37, I believe.
I actually just measured mine. It is a 30-inch interior door.
Interior.
Yeah, and so that's 76.2 centimeters for you guys who speak metric. So basically, and that's once again interior jam to interior jam, not including the strike place. So you lose probably an inch overall there, meaning you're looking at, let's just call it 70, let's just round down to 70 centimeters to figure getting your hands around and under it and whatnot to fit through a U.S. residential door. So you're cutting it close. I can't do the math in my head about build plate to exterior dimensions on a 2.4, but yeah.
Okay, I see another question about what is the main advantage of Trident versus V2.4 except the price? It's just a different build. It's definitely a lot simpler. If you think of all the Z assemblies and belts for V2.4 versus a Trident. So it's just a matter of personal preference and which printer you like. So, yep. Other than that, I think we're probably getting close to the end here. Serials will be assigned the same way as V1 serials were, just posting a video to Reddit.
Let's see. Yeah, I think we're.
Let's see here. Anything else? I know we lost Steve, unfortunately. I think he's had some technical difficulties.
His GoPro died for real this time.
Yep.
Press F.
And there's obviously IDEX discussions, but we will avoid talking about that for now.
Yep.
It's a whole separate thing.
That's a whole separate channel or a whole separate discussion. So.
Yep, that is beyond the scope of today's release. But
Or we'll be here for a while.
Yeah.
Yep. Cool. Anything else?
I think that's it.
Cool. I want to take a second to thank Steve for pushing through this. This is his first official release. And as Eddie has learned already, it's grueling. It's all super fun in games up until like logistics starts piling on top of each other. And then, people start coming into your project going, "Did you do this? But did you do this? And did you do this? You know, you have to do this." And it's like there's piles of documentation and configurations and manuals and all that, and it's no longer fun. It just feels like a job at that point, but you're not getting paid for it, and you're staying up all night because you still have a job. So yeah, I feel like what happened is Steve came in and said, "Hey, how can I help?" And Eddie just basically handed him a pile of things and ran away. Like, I'm gonna go do fun things now. You do this. And Steve took the project as per what Steve does usually, like to the last minute detail, and wrapped it all up in a super nice package. I want to thank Dunar, our manual god, effectively, because he does the manual thing and it's amazing. And thank you. And all the people who contributed during the beta program to making this printer, much more cohesive and basically production ready. So, good job, guys. Well done.
So with that, I think we'll call it a day. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and good luck out there.
Have a good one.